So we knew it like, and jobs and positions is part of that staffing model, that staffing tab, right? And you could change it at any time for a specific org, as we saw. But as soon as you hire somebody into it, into the org, you can't go ahead and just change it. And the most flexible one was jobs. That's really like when you need to expand an org fairly quickly and the job requirements are kind of all the same. So we kind of saw that in, let's say, the IT services. I have like a whole bunch of help desk support folks that I need to hire in. And then the IT operation is I'm looking for very specific requirements and I just need to create positions. So that was the difference at a high level. And in order to hire a person in a position management staffing model, you needed to make sure that you created a position, and then you could hire or contract or transfer folks in. So this is kind of what our organization had looked like. Most of it all was position, and the whole thing about inheritance too, right? If you have it at the top level, they could all be inherited, and then if you need to change something that's like one out of the ordinary, then you could just go ahead into that specific org, use that related actions, those three dots, and go ahead and update the staffing model for it, so to job. Now, the thing that I wanted to talk today about was around these jobs and positions and how to hire folks. And what you need to do is, like we saw, you could go ahead, create, let's say this was a position management. We're looking at this top one, ZaranTech, and you go ahead, you create a position for it, and then the way to create a position, I took a screenshot so we could talk through this, is if you do the related actions off the org, and this gets automatically filled out, so ZaranTech, then all these fields are something you need to fill out. So I've just put these here as placeholders, but these will be blank. So position request reason. As you see, there's no asterisks on it. So that means that it's not required, but usually people are going to put in creating a position, it's a new hire position, and it's a net new position, right? So when you click this, and what you'll see here is for prompts that have values that you can select, you kind of have this menu icon. So I just make believe that I went ahead, clicked on it, and this is the information that I got to select. So it'll look exactly like this. And what I'm trying to do is in my org, go ahead and hire Sarah into the position. And she's going to be the CEO. So I'll go ahead, put in the job posting title, CEO, number of positions, as you may have seen in the last class. This is usually defaulted to 1, but it's up to you. And where this becomes important is when you're doing, let's say, the job, or if you have like 2 positions that are going to be created for the same, like let's say in the executive management space, you're creating 2 positions for, I don't know, think of someone, maybe a CIO. For whatever reason, there's 2 positions for a CIO, but usually this is defaulted to 1. Doesn't mean that you can't update it. You could for sure update it. And something in the last class that I know I may have glanced over but want to take some time to talk about now is we did talk about hiring restrictions. You could say what specifically, like the location you want to hire at, if you want it to be full-time or part-time, and then the same thing with job profile, job family. And then if you don't have any restrictions, if you click submit without checking off this checkbox, you'll get this error message saying, hey, you don't have any job restrictions. So it's kind of flagging it for you so you don't go ahead and make that mistake. And this becomes kind of required if you don't fill out the other pieces of information. But availability date and earliest hire date, I don't know if I made this clear in the last class, so I just want to highlight it again. Availability date is saying when this position is going to be available for you to that it's going to get attached to the org and you'll be able to see it. And the earliest hire date is when you could actually hire somebody into the position. So availability date is when you'll be able to see the position, and earliest hire date is when you'll be able to actually hire a person into the position. So I hope that's clear. So, we went through this last time. You're going to go ahead and fill out this piece of information. And what we're talking about today is job profile. And what that is really is, usually when you're going to be working at a company, so I'm not talking implementation, like working with a partner, but when you're going to be at a company, most of the stuff is going to be filled out for you, but it's good for you to know so that way you know how to navigate the system, how to create different pieces of information. So job profile, you could generally just go in. Usually this should already be implemented in the tenant. And again, you could click on this menu thing on this specific prompt for this field, and then you should be able to select through a list of different values that are available. So in here, CIO, CHRO, like all this information should already be available. So make believe I selected CEO. Once I select CEO and, just click OK, ignore these two screenshots here. But what happens once I click OK, this position now is going to be available under the staffing model for that top level for this ZaranTech supervisory org. So when I go to the supervisory org, ZaranTech, let's say, and let's say I'm on ZaranTech over here, what I'll see is there's not going to be any members, but now when I go to the staffing tab, because the staffing model was position management and I just created that position, it'll now be tied to the supervisory org. So saying that in this supervisory org, I have now a position available for the CEO. And, let's say in the restrictions, I hired location New York and Texas, and these were my availability and earliest hire dates. So it's doing is just showcasing the information that I would have put in here. But now it's at least tied to the supervisory org. So now that you have the position, what you need to do is go ahead and just going through that same exercise over here and kind of showing you the thought process. Now I'm going down, and sorry, I'll be jumping a couple of screens. I'm going down to the exec management supervisory org, right? And in here, there's going to be these four folks that I need to hire. And one of them will be the CIO, one of them could be the CHRO, and maybe two employees. So the next person that I'd like to hire is the CIO, the Chief Information Officer. So go ahead, do the same thing, create position, and in that position, I'll select let's say the reason again, the same one as I had before, new hire. And the job posting title, the title that I'd like to have is Chief Information Officer. Number of positions is 1. Now, the availability date and the earliest hire date, in this case, it's the same, but it could be different, that the availability date is, earlier, and then because we're posting it and marketing it, but we can't hire somebody because maybe the location isn't available at a certain, or the person managing isn't available, or that the training that person needs isn't available, so we'd like to hold off on their hire date. And over here is where job profile, I went in, selected the prompt, and looked for Chief Information Officer. And since it was already available in the tenant, somebody had previously configured it, probably during implementation, you'll see that the description summary is already available. The job description is available. So all that information gets put in. And if I were to, you know how sometimes we could open a new tab? If I went over here and these three dots, which I know is a little bit hard to see in my screenshot, but these three dots, the related actions over here, if I click on that and open that in a new tab, this is the information I'd see. So somebody has already, like I said, I'm just picking it from a prompt, but previously somebody had created exactly what the job profile is, all the information. So what that looks like when you go to the related actions and open up this Chief Information Officer in a new tab, this is all the information you see. And on the overview tab, you could say if this is inactive or not, the effective date, which again is really the thing that drives a lot of information in Workday. Is this effective now? When you're looking at this information, is this effective? And yes, because this was effective on February 4th, it was possibly created that day, it's been effective since this date. So that means that since we're in September of 2021, it's still effective. If there were any changes, it's letting you know about any of the changes. And then the job profile name is just Chief Information Officer. And it doesn't have to be the same job profile name, but in this case, it is. Job code is not required. It used to be at some point, but I think depending on your institution, you could put this information in or not. And then the same thing that we saw with supervisory orgs. A lot of people like to show specific information in the name of specific pieces of data. Over here, they don't want to include the code name, but here's the summary, here's the description that you're seeing. Characteristics, I don't have a screenshot of it, but it's letting you know, will this be a contractor? Will it be an employee? Again, how many years of experience are you looking for? All that kind of stuff. And then compensation is something that we'll go into in the next class. Same thing with compensation by job profile, survey data by country. I haven't seen many people use this other pieces of information, but it's something, again, like once we get into a tenant, I'll be able to go into more detail. Today it's just kind of keeping it high level. And then once you go ahead and do that piece, so let's say I went ahead, clicked OK. Now I have a position that's tied to the executive management supervisory org, right? Like this is the next level down. I've created a position. I want to hire a CIO. What I have to do is, now that I have the position on this tab over here, so imagine I'm in the executive management supervisory org, and now the position is, instead of CEO, it's CIO. What I need to do is, in order to hire somebody into this, I need to create a pre-hire. And all it is basic information about the candidate before they're actually hired. So they need to be a person within Workday before they get hired. So these are the fields that are available. As you see here, let me use the laser. As you see here, this information is not mandatory. It's usually for, sometimes recruiters like to have this information filled in or not. And then the thing that they sometimes run into, which is kind of a big deal right now that Workday is investing in, is around duplicates in the system. The thought is that a person should only be one person in the system. And what causes a lot of headaches for customers of Workday is, or just in general in this space, is if somebody's applying twice, you don't want to go ahead and see that person in Workday twice. They're the same person, right? They might have updated information, but at the core of it, they're the same person. Does anybody have any questions so far? I just saw a couple of people come off of mute. Just want to make sure.
Saira, this is Ramesh.
Yes.
Under which circumstances we will allow the duplicate name? Unless until there is a use, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it could be that you have very basic information. So let's say John Smith, right? There could be a number of John Smiths that are applying. It's the other pieces of information that is going to set them apart. Like, let's say their contact information, right? They shouldn't, hopefully, if it's actually different John Smiths, they should have different contact information. So let's say over here, they put in John Smith, but they didn't put the other pieces of data in. It might, I'd have to test it out in a tenant, but I believe it gives you an alert letting you know that there's the same person already in the system. And if they've kind of done their due diligence, the recruiter, they'll just go ahead and be like, okay, allow this John Smith, and this is not a duplicate. This is a net new person. The other person, yes, has the same name, but this is a net new person. All right, so when you come to, as you can see, there's different tabs. There's legal, name information, contact information, and other IDs, and I'll just walk you through it. So over here, again, the asterisks kind of tell you that there's pieces of data that you need to fill in. So you have to fill in the prefix, the first name, the last name. It's up to you if you fill in the middle name. Then the contact information. It looks like this. And let me make this bigger so you can see. And this is, the other tab that's kind of important. Over here, I was doing this really quickly once I found out that the tenant wasn't available. So I cut off a bit of data that's underneath, but it's kind of silly stuff that's available on the bottom that I don't feel customers actually use. Not silly stuff, I shouldn't use that word. It's instant messenger. Not many people actually utilize this. I think, in the early days, 10 years plus, this may have been relevant with Skype IDs, AIM, and all that stuff. I think they're looking to deprecate that information, but I'm sure they're trying to figure out what to do with that data for some of the folks that a while back have used it. And then web address. Where I've seen this web address kind of used is like LinkedIn profiles, if they want to go ahead and add that information, or specific websites. Like now, a lot of people, instead of even using LinkedIn, they're kind of, it's kind of interesting. They're creating their own website kind of profiles of themselves. So a resume that's more interactive on a web page, and also kind of detailing more about like their portfolio of work that they've done and showcasing that on a website. So that's the kind of stuff I've seen. But in general, the pieces of data that usually get highlighted for a candidate or a pre-hire is this, and you have to give one piece of data, one address, one phone number, or one email. Something needs to be in here. So what I generally see, especially for implementation or for testing, is they'll go ahead and put an email or an address. So one piece of data needs to be here. Other IDs, this could be badge ID, this could be, usually what I've seen is badge ID, but this is not required. So once you go ahead, let's say, what I've done is, I'm sorry about going back and forth, is Chief Information Officer. Let's say I want to make Lisa Ray, right? She's in this supervisory org, and I want her to be the Chief Information Officer. So the information that I fill out is, prefix, Lisa Ray, and then go to the next tab, put her contact information. Let's say I go ahead and put her address only. Once I've done that and I click OK, the screens that I am presented with at that time. Now this person is just a pre-hire. So I can go ahead and now hire this person, and where I would, what I would do is go to hire off of the supervisory org, right? The executive management supervisory org. And since I have that position for chief information officer, I just go ahead, do the related action off the position, click hire, and then over here, the tenant, again, these tenants are shared between not only the trainer, but also the trainees. So people are testing and playing around, but in an actual tenant, what you will see is just one hire employee, and you would click hire employee, and then what you'd be able to do is this, is search pre-hire and former workers. So this kind of will, just like the name said, it'll search for the pre-hires and former workers. And over here, I would go ahead, because I just created Lisa Ray as somebody that I wanted to hire for this chief information officer role. Once I click, again, the related actions off that position for CIO, then hire employee, I'll go to here, and now I'll search for that pre-hire, Lisa, and put in Ray, or I could put in her, if I know the phone number, if again, there's so many Lisa Rays in the system, and I already know that, 20 will pop up, instead of going to each one and figuring out, because what happens is if I just put Lisa and then Ray, when I click search, at the bottom of this screen, I get cards, and each card, so a box, it'll say Lisa Ray with a little piece of information about it, high level information. I'll see maybe their contact information and that kind of stuff. So let's say there's 10 Lisa Rays in the whole, for this pre-hire, between the pre-hire and former worker. Instead of seeing all that piece of all those 10 Lisa Ray cards, but what sets them apart, they're actually different people. It's their email address, their phone number, their address, or possibly even their middle name. So as much information as you need to fill out here, you should. So that way you just have one person that you need to select from. Otherwise, then you have all those, again, the 10 Lisa Rays that now you have to figure out which one is the one that you're looking for. So once you do that, and let's say only in this specific case, I put in enough information, only one Lisa Ray comes back. I click on that and I say submit, or I think it's hire. Once I do that, then instead of over here in this that position name showing up, what'll show up is Lisa Ray. So Lisa Ray, job profile, CIO, and that's what will show up over here. So what I'm trying to show, and I hope it made sense, is when you go ahead and you're trying to hire people into an org, what you have to do is create a position. Once you've created that position, which we've done, right, previously, create a position, as long as, and the position, let's even take a step back. Over here, position management, you're going to go ahead, create a position, because you can't hire somebody until you create a position for it. You create a position, and you could do this step before or at the same time, is create a pre-hire. So just in another tab, you could go ahead and create a pre-hire just like the way we did. And as you can see with all these tasks, what's kind of, it's intuitive. It's always kind of like if you're doing net new stuff, it's create. So that's the task you would be searching for if you don't use related actions, is create position, then create pre-hire. Once you hire them, then they're part of the org. So now Lisa Ray is hired into the CIO position that's tied to this executive management. Yeah. to talk through. So let me go ahead and talk through the other piece that I wanted to. So we've just walked through this whole kind of flow over here. Now the next piece, once you go ahead, and this is the part that I was hoping to just, walk through one or two, but then the rest of this information would hopefully be filled out in, like I would have had time to configure in the tenant ahead of the class. So I wouldn't have to, so I could just walk through different scenarios. But what you see here is all the folks that are in each supervisory org, right? This group is like the executive management team that is over here. This is the team that's over here. And human resources, so all of these are like what we saw here. The staffing model is positions for most of these, except for this one. So what I've done is, let's say in the tenant, is gone in, created over here, I've created 4 positions and 4 pre-hires, added them in to those specific positions, like again, Chief Information Officer is Lisa Ray, CHRO is somebody, and then these other 2 people are just on the team, doing different functions. The same thing over here. This is the team that kind of reports into the executive management. And again, created 3 positions. We'll have to create 3 pre-hires, hire those folks into the appropriate positions that I'm creating, and just goes on and on with all the position management ones. Then the other piece, the whole reason to kind of do all this setup is also to make sure that not only that the teams are in the right supervisory orgs, but then you have to do be able to assign a specific manager, right? So this is showing you the manager kind of structure. So Saranavaz, of course, it's the highest supervisory org. You need to kind of have that, and it's just the company really. ZaranTech, so she's the CEO, but she also needs to manage the executive management team. So she's the manager for this supervisory org, right? And what you'll see is now Will Banner, he's the CHRO, and he's managing the human resources team. So as you saw, he's not in this supervisory org, he's in the one above. And that's how the management, it's not a rule. Workday will let you configure however you'd like to configure, but the general practice is to make sure that the manager is always in the org level, the superior org, right? And so if they're in the superior org, they're the member of the superior org, but they manage the subordinate org. I hope that makes sense. Yes? Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. And so that's kind of important to do, and it will make your life easier if you kind of follow it, is just to make sure that, always making sure that like Will Banner needs to be a member of executive management, and he'll oh, Ramesh, do you have a question?
Yeah, yes, sir. Even to create a pre-hire, generally in the real-time data, you should get the approvals from your superiors, right?
Yes. So something that I wasn't going to show in this class today, what I was going to show you is, the BP is pretty extensive when you're doing any sort of change. So let's say I'm creating a position here. Most likely the approval, oh, sorry, there's feedback. The BP will get routed for approval, most likely, and in general, what I've seen is not only to all like a person on the exec management team, it'll go also to the CEO, if it's kind of at this level. But if it's like at the levels below, and you can imagine like a company that has like several thousands of orgs, it really is like 1 or 2 levels above is where you need the approval. You don't go all the way up to the CEO. But during the pandemic, I've seen, because people are cutting costs and stuff, companies kind of clamping down, they've been adding more approval steps to their BP at a higher level. So that way people, could justify why they're adding cost to a company where companies were kind of trying to reduce their cost. So in general, the BP should have approvals. Like if you're not necessarily for creating the pre-hire, because the pre-hire is just there, right? You haven't actually hired it. It's generally around the actual hire. So after I've created the pre-hire, but when I'm trying to hire the employee, that's where the approval steps will be on the hire BP, or on the compensation BP, or on the creating a position BP, right? Because even creating a position on an org, there kind of has to be an approval process, So even me, I manage a team right now, and I needed to hire someone. I created a new position, but it went up to 2 levels for approval, just for me to go ahead and justify why we're doing it, making sure that everybody's on the same page, they're okay with the compensation I had set up, all that kind of stuff. So I hope that makes sense. It's not for the pre-hire. The pre-hire you could just create. It's always good to have a good applicant pool kind of out there and in the system, but hiring the candidate is the part that needs the approval. The position creation is the part that needs the approval. Did that make sense, Ramesh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks for the question. All right. So the way we go ahead and do, like once again, we've created the positions, we've created the pre-hires, we've hired the people into those positions. So again, Lisa Ray was hired into the CIO position, and then I've created 2 other positions for teammates on the information technology team. But how do I go ahead and tie Lisa Ray as the manager to this position? And the way you can do that, there's several ways in Workday, as there is with everything. Hopefully I've highlighted that enough that there's a number of ways to get to the same information. But what you would do is go to Lisa Ray's profile, and once you could go ahead, do related actions. And this is where, again, going into a tenant would be much easier. So tomorrow I'll be able to show that to you. You just go ahead, click on the related actions, scroll down kind of to the bottom, and there's something called security profile. And you could just go ahead, type in manager. Once you type in manager, and you just say which specific supervisory org they're going to be the manager for. So in the role column, I would just go ahead, put manager, just that's the role that she's going to have for this information technology org. And then I would also have to just say, type in the name of the org. So that way, when now I go to the supervisory org, let's see if I have a screenshot that I could show you. So you have this roles tab, and I wish I had taken a screenshot. And then in here, what I'm saying is and let's say I am on the information technology org. So imagine that this over here says information technology org, just ignore this. And I go to the roles tab, it'll tell me all the different roles that the supervisory org has, like let's say benefits partner and all this other stuff. But manager, over here, the role would say manager. Let's say this is the table. The role would say, it would say role here as the heading, and it would say manager. And then the name up here, and then the person's name. So in this case, it would be Lisa Ray. So that's how we go ahead, and you could do through even the org, the related actions of the org. You could just do that 3 dots. So the other way I was just talking about is just going to Lisa Ray's profile and just being able to do related actions off her profile. But the other way you could do it is through the supervisory org, just going again over here and then doing the related actions. And then there is assign roles, and then you'll be able to update that roles tab and just be able to input that information. But I'll definitely go ahead and show that tomorrow as well. Okay, so since I'm out of screenshots, let's see what we have on these slides that I can just go through and talk about. And we could definitely emphasize this tomorrow again. All right, so positions and jobs use job profiles as their foundation. Job profiles in general just describe the characteristics, right, of a job or a position. I kind of showed that in the screenshot. It's kind of the high-level summary, and the description characteristics are around like qualifications, if there's specific certifications that we're looking for. And as you saw, right, the job profile, it's just a prompt. So you can assign it to multiple positions. Let's say there's, again, going back to the help desk kind of position or the job, right? Like you can have the same job profile tied to multiple positions or workers. So it can have a one-to-one relationship, similar to like what the CEO. There's usually only one CEO, but it could have one-to-many, like an executive assistant. So there could be a number of executives, and they all have executive assistants, and they kind of all share the same kind of profile. This creating a job profile, I'll make sure that we run through that tomorrow. Just remind me if I glance over it, but I'll make sure to remember to do this piece. And this is kind of like everything around hierarchy is just around categorization, right? It's all about just the reporting of stuff into it and kind of helping people navigate to the more detail or lower level information, right? So the way the job category hierarchy works is you have a job family group, you have a job family, you have the job profile, and then you have positions that are kind of tied to the job profile. So over here, if we just walk through this example here, at the highest level, you have human resources. Everybody kind of knows that that's kind of a function kind of within a company. It's human resources. But when you delve into the details, right, there's a group that's around HR services, and there's a group that's around HR benefits, right? And so that can be the next category lower down, which is kind of called the job family. Now the job profile kind of bundles, not bundles, but you could kind of specialize it a little bit more. And that's the HR specialist, the HR generalist, the benefits analyst, right? It's just kind of further breaking down kind of what is needed for a specific position. And the positions could be for HR specialist. Like for ours, you saw we went kind of to the job profile, but that's already in the hierarchy, right? Kind of just like how we created supervisory hierarchy, cost center hierarchy, location hierarchy. There also will already be a job category hierarchy. So if you're implementing for a customer, you'll go ahead and create this. But generally, if you're working at a customer, any one of Workday's customer, this information should already be there. And what you're doing is, let's say for the position, the hiring restriction for the position that I created, I want it to be HR specialist. Automatically, because this hierarchy is already set up, it's assumed HR specialist is part of HR services, which is part of human resources. Does that make sense? You don't have to select the job family group, job family. It's kind of implied when you select HR specialist. It's kind of just saying like now all of this, so just what we were saying, job profiles, job family, and maybe this does a better job because it's more detailed, is at the lowest level in this whole job catalog, and we'll go into the definition of job catalog in a bit, but is these job profiles. You have all these different types of profiles, right? You have um, staff accountant, senior accounting officer, manager accounting. So it's all the different functions that are part of the big group of the finance job family group. So all these different profiles. And then over here, as you can see, there's an accounting, budget, investment. So key areas of this finance group that people probably need specific kind of characteristics, qualifications, part of it. So over here, these are the three profiles around accounting that kind of are part of the accounting job family. Same thing with the budgeting. Here are the specific type of functions or the characteristics in each of the positions that we would need. And they're part of the budget. Same thing with the investment, student financial services. And now all four of these really make up this family group, the finance. So plans, oversees, and administers all aspects of organizations and financial operations. So it's just a way, hopefully, what I'm trying to emphasize is grouping things together, right? At the lowest level, you have this that has more detailed information. You kind of group that into another, like higher in terms of hierarchy, into another group. They could be grouped into the accounting, and then all of this stuff is grouped into finance. And this is kind of your job catalog. So here is where we go into what is a job catalog. Your job catalog is the most important piece of the hierarchy of jobs within your organization. So again, like it's all about being able to report things and bundle things up. So the job catalog may include levels, titles, grades, compensation, and compensation again we'll go into next class. And ideally, an individual job profile, an individual has a job profile within a job catalog that has all of these elements. So job profile should include all these pieces of information. So as I kind of showed in this screenshot, right, you have the characteristics, you have the compensation. So this is where you kind of give all the pieces of information for this CIO job profile. And again, it is the foundation of all other areas of your Workday deployment, including talent, recruiting, compensation, career mobility, and succession planning. So here is a job profile and all the pieces of data that you would need to fill in. Like what we saw, this I think is outdated because now I don't think they require job codes. So this is probably an old screenshot, but you have to put in the name. As you saw, all the other pieces of data, there's no asterisks on it. So it's not required. So it's up to you if you'd like to go ahead and add the pieces of data. So over here, they've just highlighted stuff that's tied to what we're talking about around job family, job category. So these are the higher levels, right? For the job profile, job classification, and then job description. And we'll walk through it tomorrow and go through it. So here is, this is around also setting up the grades, right? So every profile, you can have by zone, tier, this is the minimum compensation, maximum compensation, and what zones is. And even in our company, right, during the pandemic now, and with most companies, people are working remotely. Some of them are working in locations that have a higher cost of living versus others. And now that everybody's working remote, people are questioning, why am I getting paid less compared to somebody else that's working somewhere else, right? And it all comes down to cost of living. And before, where companies, let's say they're headquartered in Austin, right? But other people, somebody else is working out of Atlanta. Austin has a higher cost of living in Texas versus Atlanta, Georgia. And so zone two, Atlanta might be zone one, and Austin is zone two. So you could see that there's a little bit of difference. So somebody that's hired out of Austin, Texas is going to get a little bit more money compared to somebody that's in zone one in Atlanta, Georgia for the same job. Of course, now during the pandemic, and the only reason I'm even talking about this is by the time you're at a customer site or implementing, things may change now, right? Because um, employees are pushing their companies that I'm doing the same work and now everyone's remote. Why am I getting paid less? Even if the cost of living is higher somewhere else, I'm doing the same exact job. So this may change. I've been hearing discussions about it. So, but in general, you can configure it this way. And the whole reason, the thought process is that if my headquarters is in Austin, it's a higher cost of living. I want this employee to come in to the office, so I'm paying them a little bit more versus the person that's working remote, and they have more flexibility and all this other stuff. So I don't need to go ahead and pay them more. So generally, what I've seen when you hire somebody and you're putting out, like, let's say the job requisition, and so it's tied to a job profile. It's basically saying if I want to hire, depending on the person's, let's say the hiring restriction is around location, depending on their location, I'm going to go ahead and default either zone one, zone two, and that's how their compensation is going to be going to get calculated. So you can use grade bands and levels, or you can't. What are the pros and cons? Pros is, and it generally helps, they're useful guidelines. They kind of help with that min max for compensation. It helps you propose or request that compensation is really valuable. And I've kind of seen that in my like in general, when I've been managing teams, is like, taking my bias out of the picture or what I think somebody should get. I get to follow what the company standard is. They've already set up these bands of what somebody should get in terms of compensation based really on location more than anything else. Of course, you can override it. And there's eligibility rules, and we'll get to talk about that a little bit later. But the cons are that they don't, if it's a global job catalog and your grades aren't global, then you have to have multiple job profiles. So because you don't get to put the zone one, zone two, then I need to create a job profile for every specific location or every kind of characteristic that like, okay, this location, let's say if I'm hiring from somebody again in Atlanta, I need to have a job profile for that. And if I need to hire somebody in Austin, Texas, I need to have a different job profile. This just makes it so that way, if I put these grade and bands and levels or whatever within the job profile, then I don't have to create or manage as many different job profiles. Okay, so this helps, and again, this is, I feel, more when you're working for a partner and you could have these type of discussions. And generally, if you're working for a partner, you will have many discussions about how you do things, how you want to do things, kind of requirements gathering, rather than if you're just working at a customer site. I mean, at a specific company that is a customer of Workday, you're generally not going to have these discussions. It's kind of already kind of set up. So this is just kind of walking you through the questions that you'd ask. Do you associate ranges or guidelines to jobs? Let's go down the yes. That's the one that I generally have seen. Are these grades, bands, or levels that define these ranges? If and that's also generally yes. Grades, bands, levels should be the grade, and then it's usually, just like I was saying, is tied to geography, region, or like a zone. So a zone is kind of another word for like the different locations, and then you would add that to profile. So if it's that you don't do it and the reason is because they're hourly or salary, that kind of makes sense, right? But if we go down this path, and this is actually, I think, another thing that companies are going towards is more the market kind of value of the individual is so are these grades, bands, or levels that define these ranges? Let's say they say no, then it's like one-on-one basis with the job profile. So it's doing kind of the same thing. All right. So this example is basically like they went ahead, you're creating a compensation grade, and this is where this one is for an accountant and it's intermediate, so not advanced, not beginner, but like someone that has several years of experience. And as we see here, Chicago, this could be that zone 1, and New York is zone 2. So you'll see the min, mid, and max. Generally, companies, they try to stay in the mid range unless somebody, has negotiated well, or they're really bringing something to the table that other candidates aren't, and that kind of sets them apart. They could put them towards the max. But generally, people try to stay close to the mid. But as you can see, Chicago, cost of living probably, or just because maybe they're further away from the headquarters of where this company is, Chicago has its own grade, and then New York has their own grade. And you would just go ahead and set this up. Let me see if I could zoom in. No. But I will make sure I show this more easily, but yeah, the screenshot isn't the best. But at least highlighting the example, we talked about creating jobs and positions already, but position is created with the context of the supervisory org. As I showed, you create the position. Once you create and you tie it to the supervisory org, it shows on that staffing tab of that supervisory org, and you need to create a position before you can hire somebody into that supervisory org. And then the mandatory fields on for creating a position was the title, right? The number of positions, which defaulted to 1, the availability date, and the earliest hire date, which, Ramesh, like the question that you had, availability date could either be the same as the earliest hire date, or it has to be before the earliest hire date. So that position needs to be available before the person gets hired, right? So hopefully that makes sense why there's kind of that restriction. The availability date should be before or the same date of the earliest hire date. And the hiring restrictions we went over last time, they just control how a position or job management supervisor can be filled. Within the job management, one set of hiring restriction for the entire org. So job management was the most flexible, right? It's basically just you need to hire 5 of those, let's say network engineers or whoever, and they all kind of need to have the same um, hiring restrictions or the qualifications on them. So why create positions? Because that's going to take, each position you're creating generally has to have an approval, but it's more controlled. Job management is more flexible. And you can always loosen the hiring restrictions by selecting the allow override of restrictions checkbox in the edit tenant setup HCM task. This is something that we haven't talked about, but I'll make a note, and let me do that now before I get to show you guys what this kind of looks like in the tenant. This is really key when you're, again, implementing. So I know I keep on bringing that up several times, and hopefully it's not becoming annoying, but there's a huge difference between somebody that is implementing at a customer site versus somebody that's just working with a customer, right? Like hired, at some of the companies that Workday uh, that use Workday, and I could show you where that is. Maybe that could help with the job search or where you're going to apply. But they're the ones that are working at a customer or in a company that is a customer of Workday. They're not going to be doing a lot of this initial setup stuff. They may, if, like, let's say Workday started off with HCM, but then now is also that customer is also implementing another module of Workday, let's say financials or analytics or something like that. Then you're probably going to have to help the implementation team with a couple of setup tasks. But in general, you're going to kind of stay clear of it. You're going to do kind of more the day-to-day functional, technical, kind of administrative stuff. But if you're working at a partner and they're implementing, that customer is implementing Workday, then that's where you're going to be doing more of this setup kind of stuff. But this is really key for somebody around edit tenant setup. This is kind of the basic kind of real foundation in terms of configuration and how things are going to be working in the tenant. So I'll make sure to show that tomorrow as well. Let me just make a quick note. Okay. And then default compensation. You can set the default compensation once the position has been created. You can also edit it during the hiring event. And then this is just showing how you go ahead. That related action, so key, right? The 3 dots, that's what's called the related action. You could go ahead on the position, do the related actions, select compensation, and then you could request default compensation task. And then in the other piece that I didn't get to talk about or show is around that BP. I'll make sure that BP we go over tomorrow as well. Is for create position or edit position, you can go ahead and in the BP just include the default compensation in there.